Please come here, come right on over, where we collide.
Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of The Magic Show. This week I'm going to be talking about my standard deck that made top 4 in the recent StarCityGames $1,000 Open, and if you want some lazy deck building, I'd like to show it to you now. Here's how I built the deck. I took a look at Joshua Price's list from the last StarCityGames $1,000 Open, liked it, and realized that with Glittering Wish you could have the ultimate toolbox deck. So if you notice, I took 4 cards from Joshua's deck: Skeletal Vampire, 1 Teneb, 1 Angel of Despair, and 1 Loxodon Hierarch. Stuck the multicolored cards on the board, and voila! I have Glittering Wish control. It's not the most creative deck building, but it obviously worked out pretty well. I also had to switch to 3 Wrath of God and just 2 Damnation, but that's because I had to borrow cards and my buddy Joe didn't have 3 Damnations. That's where we get into the problem with this deck, the mana base. A good mana base is essential to winning games. This one doesn't have it. I'll post my recommendations for the mana base in a bit. But what about the deck components? Like I said, it's all about the toolbox. Now, decks throughout the years have called themselves toolbox decks, and that generally involves some sort of tutoring and some sort of card advantage. In this deck, you have Phyrexian Arena and Harmonize. I found that Harmonize was a marginal card whose one shining moment of worth was overshadowed by a barrage of frantic hunting for a real answer. Most of the time, I was wishing that Harmonize was a Mortify or a Sudden Death. Persecute, on the other hand, wow, this guy was everywhere at the top tables, and expect to see it all over regionals. Its ability to simply shut down some decks like Dragonstorm can be too much to handle. I single-handedly won on the back of that card in my matchup against Dragonstorm, and so will you. As for the creature set, I will say that Angel of Despair was nowhere near as impressive as Teneb the Harvester. Man, this dragon is the real deal, easily the best of the cycle. Now, I know Numot the Devastator can win games, but in a top-decking war in the late game, nothing says good game like Teneb's zombifying ass. He's like a big flying debtor's nail, just waiting to drop some pain on your opponent. He can also do silly stuff like recur your own Loxodon Hierarch over and over, if need be. Wall of Roots served its function well and remains one of the defining green cards. Whether you like it or not, Wall of Roots is one of the best green spells we have right now. Recently we got our mean green streak back on, detailing every last thing we don't like about the color, and maybe in Lorwyn we'll finally have that green Teferi we've always dreamt of. But until then, this really is as good as it gets. As for 4 Glittering Wishes, it may look like overkill, but you may forget that this deck makes a lot of mana. Over half the damn deck makes mana, and your sideboard is full of juicy targets. My preferred target was usually Teneb. He really does end games better than any other creature this side of a Chroma. Graveshell Scarab was my silver bullet against removal heavy control decks who run out of counterspells eventually, and Orzhov Pontiff is your target for the Project X matchup, which makes their ability to make a billion 1/1 white flyers irrelevant beyond the fact that they will remove all of your creatures. Harmonic Sliver is a walking disenchant. Simple as that. This guy gets no respect. Easily the Rodney Dangerfield of the sideboard. Tormod's Crypt and Leyline of the Void are there for the bridge matchup, which is admittedly awful. This can be tightened in a number of ways. One, there are a few dead cards in the sideboard. The first is Ghost Council of Orzhova. Your mana base is so stretched you can forget about ever casting this guy. This should have been a more relevant multicolored card, such as Supply and Demand or Glare of Subdual. I also think that for the main deck, the Harmonizes need to go, and the Angel of Despair is a better wish target than a main deck monster. Again, the dragon is sometimes just better. But how about that tournament report? Well, here's the best I can do regarding my sweep in the Swiss. Round 1, I played a random Teferi's Puzzle Box / plagiarized deck. Yes, really. And after getting crushed game 1 when he plagiarized me for 8 cards, Game 2 and Game 3 were solved by Big Dumb Elephants. Round 2, I played Project X, I think. This is that round where you don't really remember much other than you won and you wish you had notes on it. Not that I had notes on any of these matches, but I'm just saying. Round 3, I played against Magic Show alum Kenny Mayer and his Gruul deck. My Wall of Roots were blocking their little hearts out, and a wish for Loxodon Hierarch seems good too. Well, that and 5 Wraths in my deck. Round 4 I played Dragonstorm, easily the most fun I had all day. The kid had a Lotus Bloom suspended with 1 counter, 3 lands, and was sending the I have the combo and you're about to lose signal, which is when, of course, Persecute came and took his T-Bird away. 2 Seething Songs and a Dragonstorm hit the bin. I also think his pride was in there as well. Very sad, very sad. The second game I hit a turn 3 Persecute, and he lost. Isn't it funny how many games come down to a single spell resolving? Round 5, I played the affable Scott Rogers and his Project X deck. Now, for the record, I think Project X is a terrible choice for regionals. It's an aggro combo deck that isn't very good at the aggro and isn't very good at the combo. The combo is very fragile, and the aggro can be hit or miss depending on how many big dumb elephants you have on your team. My sudden death kept the combo away, and my Wall of Roots spent most of the time blocking his team. The 5 Wrath effects, again, can determine almost any matchup when they want to kill you with creatures and no burn. After I drew into the top 8 with a 502 record, I then faced a really interesting Corlash control deck. Let's watch. Man, I don't know about you, but when he transmuted for Rise Fall with that Dimir House Guard, I was officially on board for calling this the best standard tutoring engine I had ever seen. Bummer about that whole, illegal thing. Still, the Corlash control deck is mighty scary, and its powerful threats like the Tridivore and Chronicler are backed with the aggro-crushing power of Tendrils of Corruption. Not a bad deck at all. Up next, we have my match against Peter Akeley's Gruul deck. It's not pretty, but it's what happened. So after that, if I were taking this to regionals tomorrow, what deck list would I choose? Let's take a look. In this build, I add some more white mana via a basic Plains and Selesnya Sanctuary. I also remove the Harmonizes for another copy of Sudden Death, one of the best removal spells ever printed, along with a single copy of Dimir House Guard, which can go fetch a Wrath of God, Loxodon Hierarch, or Persecute as the situation calls for it. The question then becomes, would I actually take this deck to regionals? The answer is, I don't know. The competition is certainly fierce enough, and I've got a tournament under my belt with it. I'd also like to try more silver bullet answers like Hobbs and a playtest against Narcolepsy. Narcolepsy, the deck, will probably run this over. It's extremely explosive, and if you don't draw those 2 Leylines or Tormod's Crypts, you could easily be waiting for your next round in less than 10 minutes. As for the Project X matchup, it's so good. In my last Swiss game, I didn't even bother boarding in Leyline or Tormod's Crypt, simply holding a removal spell all game, tutor for Orzhov Pontiff when you draw one, and you'll win the game. Next week, I'll go over just exactly what I have decided to take to regionals, share the most final build possible, and hopefully have some new decks to talk about thanks to Future Sight finally making its way to Magic Online. So until next week, fellow Magic players, this is Evan Irwin, tapping the cards so you don't have to.